So everybody online is arguing about whether Candace Owens destroyed Andrew Wilson or whether Andrew Wilson exposed Candace. And I want to score this debate the way an actual debate judge would. So I won state my junior year in cross-examination debate, and I won it in the state of Texas. And if I were sitting in the judge's chair with a ballot in front of me, this is exactly how I would look at the round. Now, here's the first thing most people miss. You can win a debate without proving your entire theory. And you can win by proving that your opponent failed to prove theirs. That distinction decides this debate. So I'm going to walk you through the way that we actually score rounds, defining every idea as we go so that it makes sense, even if you've never done debate before, okay? So what question are we actually deciding? The first thing that a judge asks is what exact question are these two people arguing about? In debate, we call this the resolution, okay? Everything else is measured against it. So if you get this wrong, the whole scoring falls apart. Andrew's main claim was the evidence against Tyler Robinson is overwhelming, okay? Candace's position was the evidence is not overwhelming. There are real problems and gaps in the state's story and enough unanswered questions to keep the possibility open that Tyler was used as a fall guy. That is the actual question that this debate was about, okay? It's not who killed Charlie Kirk. It's not did Israel kill Charlie Kirk. It's not is Tyler Robinson completely innocent. None of those things. Those are different questions, different resolutions. But because Andrew chose the strongest possible word, overwhelming, Candace does not have to produce the real killer or prove a full alternative theory to beat him. She only has to show that the evidence right now does not rise to the level of overwhelming. Okay, so a simple example would be, if I tell you that I have overwhelming proof that John robbed a bank, okay, and you show me that DNA doesn't add up, the main witness isn't sure, some of the key evidence hasn't been properly verified, and parts of the timeline have never been tested, you do not have to hand me the actual bank robber. You just have to show that my case is not actually overwhelming. Okay, so based on that resolution, Candace won the first point because Andrew's entire opening statement should have been setting up his affirmative case that the evidence is in fact overwhelming. And in cross-examination terms, if you choose a strong affirmative resolution, the evidence is overwhelming, your opening is where you shoulder the burden of proof, okay? You don't get to spend most of it on negative attacks against the other person or against their character or against their past claims and then act as if the affirmative case has already been established, right? The attacks can come later, but the opening is supposed to plant the flag on your own claim, period, end of story. Andrew told the audience that he was holding never-before-seen messages from Charlie Kirk to his security team, and he said that he was going to share them, and then read a quote in which Charlie supposedly said that he was somewhat worried that the left is trying to kill him. What he did not do was put the actual text message or a clear screenshot of it on the screen, so the audience and Candace could see the original source. He presented the content as a direct quote that he possessed, but the primary evidence itself was never displayed for verification during the debate. Now, in debate terms, that is called a weak move for two reasons, okay? He used the claim to support the idea that Charlie feared the left, which he then tied to the overwhelming evidence narrative. But he never closed the loop by showing the document that he said that he had. Reading a quote is not the same as producing the evidence, okay? So Candace and others later noted that Erica Kirk had previously said that there were no such messages on Charlie's phone.
And he would say, if they're going to get me, they're going to get me. But he was not messaging people the day before saying, I'm going to be murdered, they're coming after me, someone's going to kill me. He didn't say that. And I have his cell phone.
Without the actual text being shown, the claim stayed in the trust me, I have it category instead of becoming verified evidence in the round. So Candace won this as she won this one as well. So another point in his opening statement was that it was ghoulish that Candace is profiting off of Charlie's death.
And I think it's ghoulish to profit off of the death of a good man.
Yet you cannot strongly condemn profiting off Charlie's death as ghoulish, then participate in, promote, and personally benefit from a high dollar debate built entirely around that same death, right? The two positions do not sit cleanly together. So in debate terms, this is a credibility and a consistency problem. Once you stake out a moral claim, if it is ghoulish to profit from this, every action that looks like a personal financial benefit from the same event becomes fair game for the other side to highlight. Okay, Candace can simply say, you just called this ghoulish, yet here you are. It doesn't prove his entire case is false, but it does weaken the moral high ground that he tried to claim in the opening. Okay, and it fits the larger pattern of Andrew applying the standards to Candace that he did not consistently apply to himself, and she says that. So now here's where Andrew already kind of lost the whole debate. Andrew opened with, and the debate was framed around the claim that the evidence is overwhelming. Okay, that is a very high bar. Overwhelming means the evidence is so strong that reasonable doubt is basically gone. Okay, the case is not merely persuasive or probable, it is crushing. Later, he walked it back to something closer to, I'm personally convinced, and then quantified that conviction at roughly 3 out of 4, so 75 to 85%. Those are not the same claim. 75% convinced, I think it's likely, I'm pretty sure. Overwhelming, this is so strong that it should settle the question, period. And in debate terms, once he retreats from overwhelming to I'm 75% convinced, he has already lost the resolution because he said overwhelming in it.
0 to 100, what is the likelihood that you think Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk and killed him?
Based on the evidence right now, I don't know, I'd say 75, 85%.
As it was originally stated. So Candace does not have to prove him wrong about everything. She only has to show that the evidence does not clear the high bar that he set. Okay? A self-described 75 to 85% personal conviction does not mean overwhelming. Okay? And Andrew put himself forward as a gun expert in this debate. Candace said, so you are, I think you have said on a platform that you were a gunsmith.
So you I think have said on a platform that you were a gunsmith.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And for how many years?
Many, many years.
For many years.
Mm-hmm.
You also said that you were an Army sniper.
I wasn't a sniper in the Army.
Okay.
And I never said that.
Sorry, your wife tweeted that you were an Army sniper.
Yeah, I don't know. Like 15 years ago, she said something.
Does it change 15 years later?
She said that it was colloquial. So
Army sniper is a colloquial term?
Yeah, I was never an Army sniper.
Okay. What did you do in the Army? Did you teach? She then I corrected it and said you taught rifles in the Army?
No, I didn't teach rifle. No, I taught rifles as a private citizen.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I was an NRA instructor for many, many, many years alongside my gun shop.
Later, when they were talking about the bullet, Andrew suggested that it could have broken apart in midair. Candace pushed him on his expertise, saying things like, you're the gunsmith, and asking him to explain the technical points. Now here's why this matters under debate rules. When you claim to be an expert, the standard gets higher for you. People are allowed to judge your technical statements more strictly. Soft point rifle bullets are designed to stay together in flight and expand or break apart when they hit something. Saying one might just come apart in midair is not how that ammunition works.
Actual lead piece, this thing could have split apart in air for all we know.
So Andrew claimed expert status, then made a technical claim that doesn't hold up. So in cross-examination debate, that damages your credibility. Once you say, I'm the expert, you own the accuracy of what comes next. So this one didn't hold. Okay, so that's a Candace point. So who has to prove what? This is called the burden of proof. It simply means who is responsible for proving their claim. Candace can say, I don't think that you've proven Tyler is guilty. That is allowed. She is just attacking Andrew's claim. But the moment she says Tyler was deliberately set up or Israel was involved, the burden flips. Now she has to prove that positive claim with real evidence that connects the dots. Andrew kept forcing that distinction. His best question of the night was basically, what actual evidence proves Israel took part in the murder?
But the reason why people find Israel to be an interesting question is because, truthfully, Charlie's perspectives were changing on Israel.
Then, other than intuition, how you feel about things, do you have any evidence Israel was involved in killing Charlie Kirk?
I have already said.
Candace could have talked about motive, suspicious behavior, relationships, and unanswered questions. Those are reasons that someone might want to look closer, but they are not the same as proof that Israel did it. So on that specific claim, Andrew won cleanly. Now, does the evidence actually prove what you're saying? Okay, this is called warrant. Okay, so in plain English, does this evidence actually prove the conclusion you're drawing from it? Okay, and this is where Candace scored one of her strongest points. Okay, in Utah, a rule called 1102 lets the state use certain kinds of secondhand information called hearsay at the early stage of a case called a preliminary hearing. The state is only meant to decide whether there is enough evidence to move the case forward. It is not a full trial with all the normal strict rules, and Andrew was relying heavily on what came out of that preliminary hearing to say that the evidence is overwhelming. Okay, Candace's response was simple. You cannot treat information from that early stage where the rules are more relaxed, as if it has already been fully tested the way that it would be at a real trial, and then demand perfect proof from me on every point. She overstated it when she said the entire hearing was hearsay. There was live testimony, physical evidence, and video, but her core point was fair. A meaningful portion of what Andrew was treating as solid still has to face tougher testing later. So on the question of whether the current evidence justifies the word overwhelming, Candace used this effectively, so I give her that point. Something that doesn't fit, this is called an anomaly, which is a detail that doesn't match what you'd expect if the official story were clean and complete, right? So Candace pointed to testimony about multiple DNA profiles on the rifle and Tyler's DNA appearing more degraded and broken down.
The fact that there were 5 sets of prints, 5 plus actually by the end of the testimony, 5 sets of prints for which we already had the woman who worked for the FBI forensics testify that above 2 prints, if you're taking a sample, it's no longer a science, right? And among those 5 plus prints, Tyler Robinson's was the most degraded.
Candace correctly pointed out that this specific testimony had already been given at the preliminary hearing. That's a win for Candace on the anomaly itself, okay? Andrew's first answer didn't address what she was actually saying, but then Andrew asked the better follow-up question. Even if I give you that DNA issue, how do you get from the DNA looks weird to therefore the rifle was planted?
Again, we're going to take this, and I'm just going to even grant it because it's irrelevant. I'm asking how you get to the inference that even if you dispute that piece of evidence, that means Patsy. I'm looking for the logical chain for how you get to that inference.
And Tyler was framed. That is a fair challenge. Okay, so Candace never fully closed that gap in the debate. So Candace wins the anomaly, but Andrew wins the attempt to turn that anomaly into a full proof of a frame job. So a good judge can keep these 2 things separate, okay? So where did you get that from? This is about the source chain. This is called a source chain, or the path from the original statement or event to the claim being made in the debate. The weaker or the longer the chain, the less weight the claim should carry. So Andrew said, Tyler's father confronted him, presenting it like a settled fact.
That the parents haven't recanted any of this.
Recanted what? They have no statement from the parents.
Wait, I just want to make sure that if it was the case that was being reported in mainstream media, that your father came to you and said, hey, is this you? What's going on here? And then he and one of his buddies took you in where you turned yourself in. You wouldn't go out and be like, no, that's not what happened.
That isn't what happened, though. You're just wrong on this.
Okay, maybe I'm paraphrasing. What am I wrong on?
So what is your, sorry, just so I'm clear, where is your evidence that the parents turned him in?
Well, no.
Candace immediately asked, where did you get that? And Andrew said, official documents. Candace said, you mean the charging document?
I mean, that's
confronted
part
him.
of the official documents. Our fact checkers can pull that up. But
That-
this was one of the things that I went through and fact checked pre-debate.
Are you talking about like the charging documents?
I think it was it could have been in the charging documents, but
What you're talking about the charging documents, because
Okay,
this
go
is
ahead.
where we had to figure out where this story came from, because everyone was operating under the assumption that Matt Robinson turned him in. Until we got to the preliminary hearing and we understood, like I said, even for that, when you are charging someone, you can use hearsay. It's all probative, right?
Sure.
Nothing. So they didn't have statements. It's not like Matt Robinson, even though he was interviewed that night. Amber Robinson was interviewed that night by a Fed, separate rooms. Tyler Robinson was interviewed by a Fed. They did not produce statements saying, my son did this. My son.
She was right. A charging document is the prosecution writing down what it believes the evidence shows so that it can file charges. It is not the same thing as the father sitting on the witness stand under oath saying these things and being questioned about them. And Andrew was essentially saying it's in an official document, so it happened. Okay? Candace forced him to show the extra step between the claim and the actual source. And she did not prove the confrontation never happened, but she proved Andrew was treating a prosecution summary with more certainty than it currently deserved. This is a classic cross-examination, make the person commit to the claim, identify where it came from, and show the limitation of that source. And then reduce how much weight it should get. So using their own standard against them, basically. This is called a standards turn. It happens when your opponent sets a rule for how arguments should be judged. And then you show that their own arguments literally fail that same rule. And Andrew spent the debate demanding real evidence, positive evidence, and clear reasoning from Candace, so she brought up his earlier statement that Erica was too retarded to kill her husband.
So when I say Erica's complicit, that's my opinion. When you tweeted Erica's too retarded to kill her husband,
Yeah.
would you like to explain how you developed your evidence, your positive evidence for the fact that Erica was retarded?
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
I just think all women are retarded.
Forget for a second how officially offensive that language is, but as a judge, I'm looking at something else. Andrew just broke his own rule, okay? He had spent hours telling Candace that she cannot just say things, that she has to show evidence and reasoning. And Candace applied that to the exact standard to him, and he had none. His answer was basically, that's just what I think. This is a clear win for Candace as well. She also pointed out that Andrew's view of Erica changed after he went to Turning Point and he met her and later contacted them for material while preparing for this debate. That doesn't prove anyone bought him, but it does give a fair basis to question whether his relationship with the organization affected how strongly he was defending their narrative.
Demonstrates that you walked into Turning Point USA headquarters and came out a different man because you were critical of the organization. You
Still am.
were critical of Erica, and now you're sitting here going,
Well,
Candace,
first
I
of
want to
all,
interrogate you for
have
an
you
hour
ever
and a half
been-
about everything
hang on,
you've
hang on.
ever said
Have you
about
ever been
Erica.
critical of somebody that you hadn't met and then you meet them and you're less critical of them?
And the inverse has happened too.
And in debate, we call that raising a possible bias. When the other side gives you ground, this is called a concession. When your opponent either agrees with part of your argument or stops fighting it once you explain it clearly. And Andrew acted like the defense's failure to prove a conspiracy at the preliminary hearing meant that they did not have one. Candace explained very cohesively that he was mixing up the stages of the case. So here's the simple version. The early hearing is mainly about whether the state has enough to keep the case going. The defense does not have to put its full theory or solve the murder at that stage at all. Later, when the defense asks the judge to throw out certain charges, they can say something like, okay, even if we temporarily accept your version of the facts for this legal case or this legal argument, those facts still don't meet the legal requirements of the charge, burden of proof, right? That doesn't mean that the defense is admitting that the state's story is true. It means they are attacking whether the state's own facts actually support the charge as written. And once Candace explained this, Andrew said he wasn't disputing it. That is called a concession, and you don't get to keep arguing a point after you've accepted the other side's explanation, okay? So that was a win for Candace as well. So one small clarification. Candace made it sound like the defense is completely barred from presenting any evidence at the early hearing, and that's not quite accurate. They are allowed to call witnesses after the state finishes. The cleaner point is that Candace showed Andrew was wrong to treat that early hearing as the place where the defense must put on its full case. And Andrew accepted her explanation of how the later legal argument works. Okay, so Andrew also helped Candace in another way. He was not claiming Tyler had already been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. He was saying the evidence was personally overwhelming or extremely convincing to him. And that changes the question as to how much confidence the current evidence actually deserves. Uncertainty becomes relevant here because that helps Candace. Candace also made a real concession that helped Andrew. She had previously said that Lance Twiggs' DNA was on the rifle. In this debate, she admitted that after...
I'm going to pull it up just to have you respond
Well,
to it.
you don't have to play it because, like, if you're saying that when I initially watched it, I thought that Lance Twiggs' DNA, like, he was directly responding to that because the testimony was a bit confusing. They started by saying that they were going to, like, explaining how they got the samples, and they said Lance, Matt, and Amber Robinson, how they got their DNA samples. And then they started speaking about the gun and said, you know, multiple prints were found on them. And then they moved and they said Lance Twiggs's DNA was found on the screwdriver. When I went back and rewatched it, I realized, well, they haven't officially said that Lance or Amber are on the gun. So I think I've already conceded that we don't know that.
After looking at the testimony again, the witness had not clearly established Lance as one of these profiles. So she had gone further than the testimony allowed. That is a win for Andrew. Okay, good debaters admit when they've overstated something, and she did a great job of that. And they protect the rest of their argument. Attacking credibility, okay, this is called impeachment. So it means weakening the other person's credibility or showing that they don't know the subject as well as they claim they do. So near the end, Candace asked Andrew which of Tyler Robinson's 7 charges that he believed Tyler was guilty of. And Andrew asked to see the list.
Just so I also have clarity, since your basis has been evidentiary, you keep saying that you have evidence or like you are following evidence, which one of the charges against, or all of them, do you think Tyler Robinson is guilty of?
The specific charge?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I think is that Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, but of the 7 charges that he's being charged.
Yeah, can we list them real quick? I'll tell you exactly which ones. We'll pull them up.
Well, do you know any of the charges he's up for right now?
Yeah, of course. But
Can
I
you-
want to
can you
make sure
name
that we
one?
have them listed.
Yeah, but like can you name one? Because my general perspective is that you don't actually care about this case. You're not following
Is that
the
it?
case.
That's the
Yeah.
question? You're
Yeah,
just not
but I mean,
following it
seems,
enough?
It seems pretty, like, if you're going to engage and you're going to say the evidence is overwhelming that Tyler Robinson is guilty, I just think that you should, like,
All right.
can you tell me one
Then let's do the
charge that
counter.
he's...
You can really, hang on, this is a great
No,
gotcha.
no, no, you just got to ask me, play
Yeah.
clips out of context,
Yeah,
put me
yeah.
in the hot seat, so please just answer the
This
question.
is fair.
Can
Name
you
all
name-
7 since
can-
you've been following the case.
Okay, sure.
Go ahead.
You name one.
Yeah, you named all 7.
I'm happy to do that, but can you name one?
I think he's been charged with murder.
That's actually incorrect.
Okay, great. Now name all 7.
He doesn't even, this is like...
Name all 7.
And I
Can you name
think
all 7?
I can.
Then do it.
Sure, you don't have to
Do
put
it. No, do it. I'll count them. Go ahead.
You don't
Name
have to put
'em.
your fingers up. I
Okay,
can do
yeah,
that.
name them.
Yeah, sure.
Name them.
The first charge is aggravated murder because that's what carries
Okay,
a death
so
sentence in the
murder.
state of Utah. No,
Next.
that's not. That is literally not murder.
Okay,
And so
next.
just for people, no, I don't have to do it in a time limit. There's nothing going on. And just to explain to people the difference of why that really matters and shows that he doesn't actually care about this at all is because aggravated murder, it's narrowly defined and because
avoiding
it
the
carries
question.
a death sentence. I'm going to answer the question.
She pointed out the actual charge as aggravated murder and then listed the charges herself. This does not prove Tyler is innocent, but it matters because Andrew had spent hours presenting himself as someone who had carefully studied this case and concluded that the evidence was overwhelming. So Candace's real point was, how can you be this certain if you don't even know what the man is charged with? And that's a very valid point. Okay, so in cross-examination, that is a serious hit. You're attacking the foundation under everything the other person has been saying. And I give that exchange clearly to Candace. Okay, so connecting the dots and turning the argument around. This is called a link. So a link is the bridge from a fact to the conclusion you want to draw from it. This was Andrew's strongest tool all night. Missing body camera footage raises fair questions, but it does not automatically mean that the evidence was planted, okay? Multiple DNA profiles are interesting. They also do not automatically mean that Tyler was framed, okay? A country may have had a reason to want Charlie Kirk gone, but having a reason is not the same as proving that they took part in the murder. So Andrew kept making Candace finish the sentence. And therefore, what? He said. And that is legitimate. If the bridge between the fact and the conclusion is missing, ergo the link, the argument loses. So a turn, and the next one, so she lost that one. So a turn is when you take the other person's standards and use it against them. Candace eventually did this. If Andrew is going to demand very strict proof and clear connections for everything that she says, even the same standard should apply to the evidence supporting the official story, especially when some of that evidence still comes from the more relaxed early stages of the case. She is not proving that the evidence was planted. She is arguing that the same level of skepticism should apply for her and for him on both sides. This is a fair move. So the final score is, if that question is, did Candace prove that Israel France Turning Point or some other outside group planned Charlie Kirk's assassination? Well, then no, because Andrew would win that. But that's not the resolution. She never closed the necessary links. So if the question is, did Candace prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Tyler Robinson is a fall guy? Again, not the resolution, then no. Andrew successfully stopped her from meeting that burden. But if the question is, did Andrew successfully defend his claim that the evidence against Tyler Robinson is overwhelming, which is what they decided the resolution was about, it was overwhelmingly for Candace. She does not have to solve the murder in order to defeat the word overwhelming. She showed enough real issues that the DNA questions, the early stage nature of some of the evidence, the charging document source problem, authentication gaps, the standards problem with Andrew's own statements, and the confusion about what the preliminary hearing is for, to make his high level of certainty look too high. And then she hit his credibility when he could not name the charges against the man whose guilt that he had been defending for hours. On an actual debate ballot, Candace wins that central fight over whether the evidence is overwhelming, big time. And you do not have to love Candace Owens to admit when she wins an argument. And you do not have to dislike Andrew Wilson to admit when he wins one. So a debate is not about who do I already agree with. It is literally about who carried their burden, okay? Who answered the other side? Whose evidence actually connected to their conclusion? And whose argument was still standing when the round ended? And that's how I would score this one. And this entire debate looks more like an effort to create a new on-camera record of Candace saying something sharper or more specific that could literally later be used against her to get her sued.
Do you actually believe that anybody in TPUSA or Erica Kirk or Erica actually participated, had foreknowledge of, or facilitated the murder of Charlie Kirk?
I'm not going to get myself into a legal pickle here. Everything I've said is on my podcast.
She refused to take that bait, and she kept trying to drag the discussion back to the resolution and the preliminary hearing record, the DNA issues, the source problems, and the actual strength of the word overwhelming, okay? And that result is straightforward on the resolution that he chose. He did not carry the burden of proving that the evidence is in fact overwhelming. He spent significant time on character assassinations and attempts to elicit legally risky statements that would get Candace in trouble, and those attempts did not succeed in the way that would have been the most useful for him. That is why, if you score the debate on the question that was actually framed, is the evidence overwhelming, Candace wins. End of story. She did not have to solve the murder again or prove her larger theories. She just had to show that the high bar that Andrew set was never properly met. And this is how you score a debate, not based on vibes, but based on definitions and meeting a burden of proof. And he did not do that. Blessings to you guys. Let me know what you think.